Welcome back everyone. Let's go ahead and talk about the iPad Pro 4th generation and see how this iPad holds up actually over a little bit of a year later. Now it's pretty crazy because this is still the latest and greatest iPad. We did see the iPad Air 4 get released, which I think may be a better deal for some people, especially considering it has a newer chipset, but this iPad is still going to be around for so many years, and it's technically still one of the more expensive iPads you can pick up. Now if you want to buy one of these things, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now this iPad did come out in two different models. So it came out basically in that like 11-inch model, and then essentially that 12.9-inch, which is closer to like 13-inch model. Now both these iPads are great. There's really not too many crazy differences. They're like almost the exact same iPad. Just know that the bigger iPad does have a bigger battery size. Other than that, they're essentially the same thing. Now, I will tell you the front of these iPads for a tablet, there's not a lot of tablets out there that have this panel. First of all, there's not even that many tablets anymore. The iPads are killing it in terms of that sector. But the best thing about these iPads is the panel, I think, at least one of the better things. Very little bezel around the whole entire panel itself, but you have that 120Hz refresh rate, which, as I mentioned before, adds a lot more character to this type of device. I say year after year, having the 120Hz, even 90Hz, will future-proof yourself like crazy. You look at a OnePlus 7 Pro, that device is going to be here for a while. The iPad Pro 3rd generation, that also had 120Hz. Even the iPad Pro 2nd generation, the 10.5-inch model, had a 120Hz panel, and that adds a lot more futurability to that device, and this iPad is no different. Now you do have a USB Type-C port on the bottom as well, which is beautiful. I love having that type of capability. And on the back, the aluminum back, this iPad is a premium feeling iPad. These iPads, I've had a lot of Samsung Galaxy Tabs within the last couple months too, and these MacBooks and everything. Like, iPads just feel so premium. They're the best feeling tablets out there in my opinion, and it sounds like I'm a salesperson for these iPads. But for sure, for the things to complain about, the feeling of iPads, any iPad you name it, there's never been a cheap feeling iPad in my opinion. So in terms of the outside, thumbs up for me. I like it a lot. I have very little complaints. Now I will go ahead and hit on the cameras. Now as I mentioned, pretty much the same setup for this iPad and the other one. You do have a dual camera setup that's kind of like a triple camera setup on the back. So you have a 12 megapixel wide angle lens, a 10 megapixel ultra wide sensor. You also have that LiDAR scanner. Now what that LiDAR lens does is basically allows you to pretty much see 3D and AR and AI things. It's going to help with that. Essentially it's going to be like a future thing. It's definitely not being used crazy amounts right now, but a lot more apps for any of those VR games and stuff. That LiDAR sensor is going to help you kind of have some more capability in that sense. So it's going to be giving you more accurate stuff. But other than that, the actual camera lens itself actually is not that bad. Like, it's actually a very, very good camera. You can do 4K at 60 on the back of this camera, and I would pretty much allude it to something like an iPhone 11 camera. I think it's around the same thing. It's definitely, like I mentioned, not the best camera out, but I don't really see too many things to complain about. I think it's a pretty solid lens, and I think for everyone's day-to-day use, you're probably going to be totally okay with it. And I think you can even shoot videos with it. You can do anything you really want to with this lens, and I think you're probably going to have a really, really good time with it. Now the front, you do have a 7 megapixel sensor, which is pretty interesting because I feel like they could have done a little bit better, but again, what are we going to do? You can do 1080p at 60 on the front camera here, and again, as I mentioned, I think, it gets the job done. It's definitely not like the craziest camera on the front. I feel like the back camera proportionally is better than the front camera on this thing. So it's weird they put like a really good back camera, but kind of a weird front camera. But I think it's totally okay. It's about like an iPhone XR with the front camera here. So iPhone 11 almost camera on the back, iPhone XR camera on the front. So that's pretty much how it's summed that specific area up. And that pretty much covers up the camera. I think it's still a really good camera for sure. Now moving on to, I think, one of the more important aspects of this iPad is the software quality and the battery life. First of all, the software on this phone, it's going to be lasting for a long, long time. This thing just came out last year. Even though it has a little bit of a different A12 chipset inside of it, it's probably going to last longer than probably even an iPad Pro 3rd gen. I don't know for a fact. Hopefully it does. We don't really know for a fact. But this iPad is going to be lasting for a very long time. You can pick up this iPad today. You can pick up this iPad next year, or even like 2 years from now, and still feel like you're going to be having an iPad that's going to be getting software support for for just a long amount of time. I think for a lot of people, this is probably one of the more probably important aspects of it, because when you get an iPad, you don't want it to be outdated tomorrow, and that's exactly what's going to happen here. So for sure, this iPad is going to be killing it in terms of that standpoint. The battery life as well is another huge area that I mentioned is a really good area about this phone. You're getting a smaller size battery on the 11-inch model, but me personally, I've actually owned the 11-inch iPad Pro 3rd gen for a while, and I can definitely tell you it's not like, it's a pretty good battery life inside of it. I will say iPadOS 14 was kind of like a strange experience on all my devices in terms of battery, but I do think if you want the best size battery on an iPad, getting the iPad Pro 4th gen, the taller model, the bigger model, the 12.9-inch model, is going to be the better one for you. But as I mentioned, I think, the 11-inch model is also a solid option as well. So you can't really go wrong with either one of those. So I think those are probably the best strong suits about this iPad. One being, the actual iPad itself with its software updates and day one updates and all that stuff. That's always a really good experience. But the second thing, the battery life on these iPads are actually still pretty good for the most part. So keep that in mind, but that's pretty much how I'd kind of sum up that area of the video. Now ending off with the performance. This device, like I mentioned, has that Apple A12Z Bionic chip inside of it. The base model has 6 gigs of RAM, and I guess they did kind of go up to about 6 gigs of RAM. I think all these models go up to 6 gigs of RAM, which is strange. But one thing I'll tell you, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, you don't need an insane amount of RAM on an iPad to get the same type of performance on like an Android or on a MacBook or something. These iPads, and I've said this for a long time, do a very good job with the chipsets and the performance that they have inside of it. So if you're somebody who has this type of iPad, you're going to be getting a very solid type of experience from this thing. First off, for students and for creatives or whatever the case is, you're going to be getting a very solid experience. First of all, Apple Pencil support, which is great. So if you're creative and you like drawing or taking notes or whatever, this, iPad mixed in with an Apple Pencil is going to be a very strong thing to have in your arsenal of tools to choose from. But even with the 120 Hz, it just adds so much more fluidity to the device, and the gestures with iPadOS, it definitely feels like it's going to be, even like if 10 years from now, it's still going to be very smooth in my opinion. Now, another pretty major thing to keep in mind, in my opinion, is the RAM. With 6 gigs of RAM, you're pretty much getting the same amount of RAM as you're getting on an iPhone 12 Pro Max. So again, that's another pretty major thing to keep in mind. Is it a big deal? Yes, it's a completely big deal because you're future-proofing yourself and pretty much tapping into the same amount of RAM as the latest iPhones. But also, it's like, even if this thing had 3 gigs of RAM, it'd still be extremely fast in my opinion. So this iPad, for sure, whatever you're going to do with it, you're going to be getting a solid experience. I don't even think, I mentioned this before, the iPad Air 4 with its A14 chip, I really don't think you're going to notice those many differences as of right now, but I am curious to see which iPad is going to last longer. The iPad Pro 4th gen with its A12Z chip, or the iPad Air 4 with its A14 Bionic chip, that's essentially coming out. So I guess we'll see, which is essentially, the newer one. So I guess we'll see what happens there, but I'll definitely tell you in the performance sector, this device is a very good device now and highly recommended for sure. So to kind of sum up this video and to answer the question, should you go and buy an iPad Pro 4th generation in 2021? Well, this is pretty much what I'll tell you. I think this iPad is still completely worth it for the most part. I can't really think of any specific reason why this iPad is like a bad pickup. I think this iPad is a very good iPad. First of all, the body of it is, timeless. It feels extremely, premium. It doesn't feel cheap at all. On top of that, the cameras are actually pretty good. The front camera is a little different, but I do think, with the back camera and, even the front camera, it's a good camera setup for sure. And I think it's a pro. The battery life is awesome. Software updates for a very long time. USB Type-C port, which is great. And performance is up to par with probably some MacBooks out there too. Like, this thing is a very solid performing iPad. As I mentioned before, realistically, whatever you're going to do with it, you're going to be perfectly fine. I think people kind of, overestimate how much power they need from an iPad. Even if you get an iPad, if you give me an iPad 8th generation, I'll be perfectly fine with it. I know exactly what to do with it, and that's really it. If you give me this iPad Pro 4th gen, it's like I'm being spoiled. This is a crazy good device, and I can't really think of too many things to complain about it in my opinion. So in terms of that pretty much covers it up. Like I mentioned before, if you want to pick one of these things up, links will be down there in the description. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Hit the like button if you guys enjoyed the video, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count. So it means so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.